Well, the opening shots in a fierce battle are being fired, and the outcome will affect all of us EV drivers. But we need to go quickly back to how we got here. Dave Takes It On investigates the cost and the method of charging your EVs at public chargers. Well, habits die hard. All your life up until now, you've visited a petrol station whenever your car needed the fuel for topping up. There was and is no alternative, unless you go back to 129 years ago. Back then, when the first four-wheel car with a petrol engine took to the roads in the UK, there were no garages, and in fact no real roads. Horses and carts had ruled for hundreds of years, and they needed no solid surface. In fact, a solid hard road was not good for a horse's feet. So oil had been discovered decades before, but as there were no cars, no one made any petrol. Crude oil was distilled purely for kerosene, we call it paraffin, for use in lamps as it burned brighter and cleaner than animal fats or vegetable oils. Naphtha, a very crude version of petrol, was not really used other than as a solvent or cleaner. As the 19th century neared a close, the first petrol engine car made its way onto the roads, as they were back then, powered by naphtha. Cars took off relatively quickly, and within 15 years, here in the UK, there were about 20,000 cars. That was quick. And still no petrol station. Crude oil was now being distilled, but the petrol was sold in cans, usually by local chemists or hardware shops. Imagine that, heading to your chemist and buying a few cans of petrol. Well, Shell was one such shop. In fact, it was a seaside shop selling things made out of shells. Some were gathered from nearby beaches, others were imported by the owner, Marcus Samuel. And the company was looking for a name for its own version of kerosene, and so Shell began. Well, for over 20 years, cars were on the road and no petrol stations opened. I'm really glad that the doomsayers from back then didn't have their way and block or ban cars. Yeah, they were there, and they're still here to this day. Well, the first petrol station opened in Aldermaston in 1919, by which time there were tens of thousands of cars. By 1930, it had rapidly increased and we'd reached 1 million cars. And by that time, there were hundreds, probably thousands of petrol stations. So began the daily, weekly or monthly trip to the garage. It hasn't changed in the last 100 years. Drive to the garage, fill up, pay up, then head home or off on your journey. But again, we didn't fill up. That was way too expensive. Most people did, and do to this day, just put in a few pounds worth or tens of pounds worth, just enough to get them through the week. Well, incidentally, that was why, when we had the tanker drivers' strike a few years back, we ran out. When ordinary drivers heard there might be a shortage, they actually filled their tanks full, right to the very top. So literally overnight, about 30 million cars put in well over 100 million gallons more than normal, thus causing the shortage that made them fill up in the first place. I have to say, I was one of them. Well, a habit's really hard to break, so when modern EVs first hit the road, in any number around 2011, they were treated exactly the same. You went to a charging station to fill up, and there were precious few of them, cars and charging stations. 2014, there were less than 4,000 car charging stations in the whole of the UK, mostly CHAdeMO, to suit the most popular car, the Nissan Leaf, plus a few superchargers from Tesla, which began to be installed in late 2012. Then it was discovered you could charge at home, and the world changed, but not people's thinking. Ask the average petrol car driver how you charge a battery, and they will say you drive to a charger and there's very few of them, and you'll plug in for a couple of hours. Right or wrong, and thankfully it is wrong, but that is what the average person really thinks. Well, seeing a golden opportunity, a growing EV market, but still with a very limited number of public chargers, many companies jumped in and tried to make a killing. BP set up Pulse about 10 years ago, as did Shell, the Electric Highway, EcoCity, and they began the installation of today's charging network. But they stuck to the 100-year-old habit, just installing slow chargers on garage forecourts or motorway services, where you were going to go anyhow or had always done. And they still do that to this day. No imagination. Worked 100 years ago, it'll work today. But we live very different lives today, and those lives do not fit into their business plans. Most stuck to 50 kilowatt chargers, really slow. Even then, while the very first charger ever installed, the V1, was rated at 130 kilowatts, nearly 3 times faster. And our modern lives demanded speed. Tesla responded. They came out with the V2, 150 kilowatts within a year or so, followed by the V3s a couple of years later. That was rated at 250 kilowatts. Charging speed was reduced to around half an hour for a 20 to 80 charge for an average modern EV, and 15 minutes for the better ones. Now most charging networks produce chargers rated at 200 kilowatts or faster. Well, apart from InstaVolt, that sticks to 160 kilowatt maximum. Strange. Well, Tesla found that most of the motorway services had been stitched up with monopoly contracts that prevented them from installing at many of the motorway services, well, courtesy of Ecotricity Electric Highway, so they just built alongside in a nearby hotel at the services or a retail park at the services. It's only recently that motorway services have discarded that monopoly as they were missing out on tens of thousands of EV drivers and their families stopping on the motorway. But still, installations stuck mainly to motorways. And then rapidly things began to change, first with an eye to saving money. Motorway service operators realised they could build just one service station instead of two, northbound, southbound. Well, it's much cheaper to build one, and sometimes they now attracted in families as it might be the nearest fast food outlet for many miles, so they got customers away from motorway drivers. And off motorway, the monopoly did not apply, so services appeared having 2 or more network chargers on the same site. Banbury Retail Park is one example of a retail park, has Osprey and Tesla. Now, at first, they didn't compete. Tesla chargers were only for Teslas. Osprey could serve all the rest and charge whatever they wanted. Tesla gradually reduced their prices year after year, becoming and remaining the cheapest EV charging network in the world, special offers excluded. Now others followed, and today we often see different networks at the same location. We got Apple Green and Tesla at Warwick, and Gretna Green, which is an off the motorway services, has Ionity, Apple Green, Tesla and GridServe all operating chargers on the same site. But recent events threw all this into total chaos. Tesla did a deal in the States to open a large number of superchargers to all vehicles, and then copied it all around the world. Now, for the first time, motorists actually had a choice. A few, and only a few, superchargers opened up to all in the UK, just really to test the market, make sure it would work, i.e. you wouldn't have Nissan Leafs or Renault Zoes plugged into a 250 kilowatt charger, blocking them for an hour, causing horrendous queues so that Tesla drivers could not charge their own car at their own chargers. But it didn't happen like that. Tesla opened up more and then released a new charger, the V4. For the first time, this has a screen and contactless terminal. So now using a Tesla supercharger was just like using any other charger, via an app or contactless. And drivers discovered 4 critical things. First, there were more superchargers with ultra-rapid chargers than any other network. They were everywhere. Yeah, technically BP or maybe InstaVolt may have more rapid chargers, but the vast bulk of them are really old-fashioned 50 kilowatt units. Many of them shared power, and many broken or out of service. Second, they were always installed in large numbers. A typical supercharger has 12 chargers. Some have more than 20. Unlike the old single or double units everyone else was installing. So queues, they did happen, but they were rare. Third, they always worked. They were incredibly reliable. It became a really rare sight to see a Tesla supercharger out of order, and if you did, it was back up and running in a day or so. Fourth, they were really, really cheap. I mean really cheap. While BP and InstaVolt are still charging 85 pence per kilowatt hour, the average Tesla driver off-peak was paying 35p. And even non-Tesla drivers, who actually didn't get the cheapest rates, they only paid about 45p, almost half of what they'd been paying previously. And that's when the war started. You see, companies like Osprey at Banbury suddenly found their chargers at 79p were just not being used, because 20 feet away, there were Tesla chargers at 45p, far less if they paid a monthly fee and became a member. People simply stopped using Osprey chargers at Banbury. And this happened everywhere that the superchargers opened to non-Teslas. The entire charging network that had sprung up was now vulnerable to becoming redundant, totally unused. But the main battle is yet to come. Many superchargers, in fact most, are still not open to non-Teslas, like Warwick with Apple Green and Rugby with GridServe and Gretna Green with BP Pulse Ionity and Apple Green. But they must be dreading the day that they are opened up. Many motorists get fed up seeing rows of empty Tesla chargers while they queue up for the 1 or 2 or maybe sometimes 4 chargers that they can use. They know the day that a supercharger opens up to all, they will switch instantly. Only an idiot would go to a location, if they had a choice, and pay twice what they need to pay for exactly the same electricity. And the networks now know this, and they have no answer. Apple Green have chargers installed that cost 79p, and their business model probably relies on that amount to make it viable and attract the funding they need. What happens when the investors find that Tesla's just opened up to all and the chargers they have invested in stop being used instantly, just like turning off a tap? What do the investors do? And what does Osprey do? Oh, the answer is there is no answer. If you look at all the alternatives, I really cannot see an answer. Look at Banbury as an example. Well, Osprey could drop their prices to match Tesla and instantly lose all their investors and all future investment. And even doing that won't be enough. You see, Tesla offer 250 kilowatt chargers. That is a rate that many cars can take these days. Osprey offer mostly 150 kilowatt chargers, certainly at Banbury. So even at the same price, a Hyundai Ioniq 5 or BMW i4, Kia EV6 or Porsche Taycan will still choose the Tesla. Well, it could upgrade to 250 or 300 kilowatts, but where do they get the money? Investors are unlikely to support providing money to install faster chargers that will have to charge a heavily discounted price that might still not be used. I wouldn't invest in that. Well, Tesla haters driving other brands will secretly start using them if they're all half price. What can Tesla do? Well, they could raise the price to match and instantly alienate every single Tesla driver to date and destroy their sales forever. Nobody would touch them if they did that. Maybe they agree to only open new locations to non-Teslas, but that won't work. There are loads of Tesla superchargers. If one station was at a much higher price trying to please a network, drivers simply go elsewhere. A bit like most drivers avoid filling up at a motorway services and instead go to the local supermarket because they know it'll be cheaper there, dearer on the motorway. So we get the clash of the titans. There's going to be blood spilled. What's possible? What could happen? Well, first Tesla could just open them all up, take all the business and let the other chargers, the charging networks, just give in or slowly or rapidly go bust. But that is not what Tesla wants. They want others to build out their networks. Elon is not afraid of competition. He once said that if others came along and offered better cars for cheaper, he'd let them take over. He has plenty of other businesses he could concentrate on. The other networks, BP Pulse, Instavolt, Osprey, could cut prices, but that's definitely not going to happen anytime soon. There's just too much private and public money invested in these networks to see their profit and returns shrivel away to nothing. Nope, it'll be head in the sand. It's going to get better until the money and patience run out. Well, Tesla could, as some people suggest, just buy out and operate the other networks. But again, no. Chargers are most likely not the right sort. They're not linked into the Tesla computer network and probably won't be able to be linked. No. Well, what price would they pay? They already make their own chargers and they're reported to be about 1/3 of the price of the competition. These existing chargers have little practical value to them. Their own are much better. How about in the future as demand increases? Again, no. Tesla has their own V4s that they claim are future-proof. Now, I take that to mean they'll be switchable up to well in excess of 500 kilowatts and most likely be operated to automatic 400 or 800 volts charging depending on what car is plugged in. Why would they want old chargers, even 350s that are being installed today, which most certainly can't be upgraded so will quickly become as useless as today's 50 kilowatt chargers? Tesla could avoid opening up superchargers to all locations where there is obvious competition. Take Rugby services. Tesla has 28 chargers, GridServe has 12 350 kilowatt chargers. Tesla doesn't have much in the way of queues. I've been there several times. The 28 chargers are often fairly quiet, and the few queues, they only last for a few minutes. Why would they want additional chargers there that they just don't need? And why should they lose business and money as people ignore them at the higher price and go to cheaper superchargers nearby? That doesn't make a lot of sense. Well, maybe the others can offer something Tesla doesn't. I don't know, free meal while you charge or similar. But sorry to say, it'll probably be still cheaper to use Tesla and go and buy the meal and pay for yourself. I actually cannot see an answer. I don't see Tesla and Elon changing his business model just to help them out. I can't see any business model that would work for the other networks. Now, I know people often say, well, M&S and Waitrose and Harrods, they all survive quite happily, even thrive, with massive competition from cheaper stores like Aldi and Lidl right on the doorsteps. Actually, that's very true, but comparison doesn't work with charging. M&S and Harrods offer select, high-quality specialty goods that have a significant reputation for quality, such as a Harrods Christmas hamper. You cannot get an identical one anywhere else at any price. And if you did manage to put one together, it's not a Harrods hamper. It's not the same thing at all. EV charging just supplies electricity that they all get from the grid. Even those with solar farms and storage batteries attached, they still buy and sell electricity to and from the grid. It is all exactly the same electricity. And from a business point of view, nobody is going to choose to buy it from, say, BP at twice the price just because it's a BP charger. Some will say Tesla will put up their prices to match. But if that was their plan all along, they could be doing that right now. 35p off-peak versus Instavolt 85p all day, all year. They could easily put up prices now to maybe 60 pence and make twice the profit. They haven't. And I believe they won't. It goes against the core business plan. You've heard probably of the secret Tesla master plan written way back in 2006. Well, a link to this is included below, and I highly recommend that you read the whole thing. It's only a page long, but stressing again that this was written and published almost 20 years ago. The two critical paragraphs I'm going to quote verbatim. Number 1. As you know, the initial product of Tesla Motors is a high-performance electric sports car called the Tesla Roadster. However, some readers may not be aware of the fact that our long-term plan is to build a wide range of models, including affordably priced family cars. This is because the overarching purpose of Tesla Motors, and the sole reason I am funding the company, is to help expedite the move from a mine and burn hydrocarbon economy towards a solar electric economy, which I believe to be the primary, but not exclusive, sustainable solution. Summary at the end says, so in short, the master plan is, number 1, build a sports car. Number 2, use that money to build an affordable car. Number 3, use that money to build an even more affordable car. And here's the killer, while doing the above, also provide zero-emission electric power generation options. Is that the plan of a company that is suddenly going to hike prices and gouge their loyal customers? I'm Dave.